I've never been the type to lose my temper, until now. The HOA, hiding behind their endless rules and false sense of superiority, destroyed the last thing my dad ever built before he passed. They labeled it a safety issue. What they didn't expect was that I'd do something that would cost them dearly. They thought they held all the cards. They didn't. What came next? Let's just say their picture-perfect safe community didn't feel so safe anymore. Tell me in the comments, how far would you go if someone crossed that line with you? It was Monday morning, 8:15 a.m. I pulled into the driveway, ready for another routine day at Carter Marine Logistics, the water transport company my father had spent over 3 decades building from nothing. But instead of normalcy, I was met with contractors wielding chainsaws, tearing down the wooden bridge that connected my land to the main lake. Not just any bridge. This was the one my father and I had spent 3 summers building together, right before his cancer diagnosis. Every joint carefully fit, every board handpicked, every nail hammered in with the kind of care that teaches you patience and pride. And there was Martha Crowley, clipboard in hand, directing the demolition. Her perfectly coiffed blonde hair didn't move in the morning breeze. She wore that familiar smug look I'd seen at every HOA. Meeting for the last 2 years, the look of someone who honestly believes they're improving. Lives while making everyone else miserable, she spotted me, climbing out of my truck and actually smiled. I still don't know why that detail stuck, but it did. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the type you give before delivering bad news, sharp and cutting. She raised her clipboard like it was a weapon. "Perfect timing, Daniel," she said, her voice slicing through the air, full of satisfaction. "I wanted to make sure you understood what's happening. We filed emergency permits over the weekend, citing structural risks and community impact. Your bridge has officially been declared unsafe, an eyesore really that drags down property values. The workers didn't slow down. Every bite of the chainsaw felt like an insult to my father's memory. I stood frozen, watching his last creation collapse into the water, my chest tightening with every piece that sank. Deep down, I knew this wasn't about safety. Martha had been pushing her marina project for over a year, trying to convince everyone we needed a centralized docking facility she could control. This wasn't demolition. This was leverage. My bridge was the one thing that allowed me to run my business without relying on her, without paying her fees, without bowing to her rules. You'll need to rent dock space from us now, Daniel. Market rates, of course. That's how we operate here, Martha continued, her tone dripping with greed. We're already negotiating with investors, very excited about the potential. Once the marina is running, you'll have far better facilities than this. Relic ever offered. She waved at the wreckage like destroying my father's work was some kind of favor. I wanted to unload every thought I had about her facilities and profit potential, but I knew better. Sometimes the smartest move is silence. Let them think they've won. The money side was bad enough. My business relied on moving equipment directly from my property to clients across the lake. Without the bridge, I'd have to haul everything to the public launch, wasting hours, driving up costs, and losing my edge. But the real pain wasn't financial. It was personal. That bridge was the last living memory of the summers I spent with my dad, learning, building, doing something right the first time. Watching it sink was like losing him all over again. That night, my friend Grant Holbrook called. He works at the Port Authority, meaning he knows more about water systems than most people ever will. We met at Murphy's Bar downtown, and over a couple of beers, he told me something that made Martha's timing click. Apparently, the HOA had tried to partner with the previous dam owner months back, but were flatly rejected. Now Granite Shore Inc. was selling the dam. They were bleeding money from rising maintenance and environmental compliance costs. If Martha catches wind of the sale, she'll try to grab it, Grant warned, finishing his beer. Think about it. If she owns both the marina and the dam, she controls water levels, dock access, everything. She'd have total power over every homeowner on this lake. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Martha didn't just want monopoly over boat access. She was aiming to control the entire lake itself, turning a shared community resource into her own money machine. Walking home, I stopped where my father's bridge used to stretch across the channel. The debris still floated there, fragments of wood now just hazards for passing boats. As I stared at the current moving through the wreckage, something clicked. I'd been focused on the bridge, but the bridge was just the surface. The real power was in the water. Who controlled it, how it flowed, who set the rules. The bridge wasn't the key. The dam was done. Grant's tip sent me into overdrive. For 3 nights, I locked myself in my office, combing through records, filings, databases. Every document was another puzzle piece. Logistics isn't just moving things from point A to B, it's about systems, leverage points, who holds authority, and water management. Just another logistics system, except most people don't pay attention until it's too late. Granite Shore had owned the dam for 15 years, but new EPA regulations were crushing them. Stricter discharge monitoring, habitat protection, water quality testing. It had gone from a simple fee-collecting asset to a costly regulatory burden. Their liquidation filings showed over $200,000 in immediate upgrades needed. The breakthrough came when I called Calvin Ross, an independent dam engineer. I posed as a marine logistics guy curious about water management. Calvin loved talking shop, and his explanations were gold. He told me dam operators had wide authority to adjust water levels, as long as the paperwork and environmental notices were in order. Most people don't realize how much leeway dam operators have, Calvin said, flipping through what sounded like a manual. The key is documentation and timing. File the right notices, follow protocols, and you can shift water levels pretty significantly. It's just a matter of paperwork, his words stuck with me. This wasn't just infrastructure, it was control. Legal, official control over other people's biggest investments. It was equal parts terrifying and electrifying. Setting up the company to buy the dam was easier than I expected. I formed Carter Water Management LLC, keeping my personal name off the paperwork but retaining full authority. Granite Shore was desperate to sell before compliance deadlines hit, so they cut a deal fast. 2 weeks later, I owned the dam. The flow of Mirror Lake, every dock, every shoreline. Every multi-million-dollar property, including Martha Crowley's mansion, was under my control. Meanwhile, Martha's legal team ramped up their threats. One letter from Susan Mertz dripped with hostility. Move your equipment now or face legal action. The tone was pure venom. When I called Susan to clarify, I asked if she was certain the HOA wanted to fight a battle over water rights. Her confident tone faltered. I told her I was just curious, whether they'd fully researched the regulatory landscape before pushing so aggressively. The conversation wrapped up with her saying she'd circle back after checking with her colleagues. Calvin's inspection of the site showed the dam truly did require maintenance, especially the bottom outlet system, which regulated lake levels during seasonal cycles. The timing couldn't have been better. Maintenance work was normally scheduled in the summer months for favorable weather, and all it required was filing notice with county officials 72 hours in advance. The process was completely above board, authorized under state law, and documented according to environmental protection standards. I wasn't planning anything illegal, or even remotely questionable from a regulatory standpoint, but it would be dishonest to pretend the timing was accidental. Martha's investor showcase was set for July 14th, complete with tours of high-end waterfront properties that depended on flawless lake conditions and unobstructed views. Several $7 million deals hinged on a picture-perfect presentation, particularly the photo sessions planned for exactly 10 a.m. when the light was ideal for marketing shots. Calvin confirmed that if I filed my maintenance notice exactly 72 hours before July 14th, county approval would be automatic, creating a legal window that aligned seamlessly with Martha's most critical day of the year. Late that night, as I studied Calvin's engineering drawings, it felt like I was staring at blueprints for something far greater than routine maintenance. The valve system offered total control of lake levels, with full legal authority to drain and refill as needed for equipment access. Environmental monitoring would keep everything within legal limits, but the visuals would be impossible to ignore. Martha's polished investor showcase would transform into a tour of empty mudflats and grounded boats. I kept telling myself this was just business, but I knew better. The dam required servicing regardless, and I had every right to schedule the work. Yet as I compared the engineering diagrams with Martha's tour timeline, I realized I was crossing a line. This wasn't simply about recovering costs or regaining lake access. It was about using legitimate authority to do something that felt dangerously close to revenge. The only question left was whether I'd have the nerve to go through with it. The monthly HOA meeting that Tuesday night was standing room only, with over 200 people tuned in online. Martha, as usual, commanded the stage as if she held all the power. The moment I walked in, I felt the weight of their stares, cold, appraising, like prey entering a predator's den. Looking back, I should have realized she was gearing up for something bigger than routine updates. She opened the meeting with dramatic precision, her voice carrying that false warmth politicians use right before sticking in the knife. "Before we move on to regular business," she said, "I want to address the unfortunate matter of the bridge demolition. Some of you have questions about the HOA's decision, and I think it's important you all understand the situation." She gestured toward me like I was evidence in a trial. I kept my face blank, but inside I was noting every calculated word, especially how she was painting me as the villain in her narrative. "Daniel Carter has been running a commercial logistics business out of his residential property without proper oversight," she continued, her tone gaining strength. "His wooden bridge wasn't just a safety hazard violating multiple codes, it also created an unfair advantage that undermined our community standards." The way she framed it, you'd think I'd been running a criminal racket, not the same water transport business my father had legally operated for 3 decades. A number of homeowners nodded along, proof that she'd been seeding her version of events well in advance. Then came her real performance, the grand reveal of her marina development plan. Using a presentation system that must have cost the HOA a fortune, she unveiled glossy renderings, financial projections, and timelines that looked like they came straight from a high-priced consulting firm. The project promised 40 premium slips, a clubhouse with restaurant facilities, and what she called managed water access for all commercial use. Fees would jump. HOA management costs up 40%, plus an additional annual charge for waterfront owners to cover marina upkeep. I watched as the room shifted. At first, faces lit with excitement, but as the financial reality sank in, concern crept in. Martha's tone turned condescending, the kind of voice people use when they're about to ask for money. "I know this financial commitment seems significant," she said, "but we must think long-term. This marina will establish us as the premier waterfront destination in the region. Property values will rise 15 to 20%, easily offsetting the investment." Around the room, people started calculating in their heads, some swayed by the promise of appreciation, others clearly worried about the burden. Martha was effectively asking the community to mortgage its future for her vision while presenting it as if she were doing them a favor. Then she unveiled her crown jewel. Her voice took on almost a reverent quality as she announced, "On July 14th, we'll host an exclusive investor showcase, featuring guided tours of our most impressive waterfront properties." She clicked to a slide showing the timeline, complete with professional photography sessions locked for 10 a.m., perfect lighting for marketing. She emphasized that several $7 million sales hinged on flawless presentation, especially the aerial drone footage designed to capture unbroken lake views and pristine water. Martha framed the event as if the entire community's economic fate rested on its success. She detailed her guest list: real estate developers, investment firms, and wealthy individuals specifically seeking luxury waterfront estates. The showcase would highlight 5 mansions, each in a different architectural style and price bracket, with asking prices between $6 and $8 million. Clearly, she had poured months into planning, treating it like the make-or-break moment of her entire strategy. During Q&A, a homeowner asked about environmental impact. Martha's response was polished, rehearsed, and revealing. She casually mentioned already working with regional water management authorities to ensure optimal lake conditions during construction and operations. That was the detail that made everything click. Martha wasn't just after control of the marina, she was setting herself up to control the entire lake ecosystem. When the meeting adjourned, Martha made a deliberate move to intercept me while others were filing out. Her smile was sharp, predatory, the kind that made me want to step back, though I held my ground. "I hope you see none of this as personal, Daniel. It's just business. Once the marina's complete, you'll have far better facilities than that old bridge ever offered. You might even find working within our system more profitable than running independently." The tone left no doubt. This wasn't a suggestion. It was an ultimatum dressed up as an offer. I told her I'd consider my options, which seemed to satisfy her need to feel like she'd won the exchange. Outside in the parking lot, small groups whispered. Some were giddy over the property value promises, others anxious about the new fees. But what struck me most was how completely Martha had cemented herself as the gatekeeper of the community's future. She had positioned herself as the person everyone had to go through. It was terrifyingly effective. And in that moment, I understood why she'd been so confident about destroying my bridge. This wasn't about one bridge. Martha wanted it all, the lake, the land, the people, and I wasn't going to let her take it. The county clerk's office opened at 8 a.m., and I was waiting outside with my paperwork before the first employees arrived. I had obsessed over the details all weekend, every form, every signature, each one crucial. One mistake and the entire plan could collapse. Calvin had drilled me twice on the requirements, reminding me how seriously environmental agencies treated these filings. The timing was everything. I had to submit exactly 72 hours before July 14th. Today was my only chance. Patricia, the clerk, was meticulous. She combed through each page with the steady focus of someone who'd spent years catching other people's errors. "Water level adjustment for infrastructure maintenance," she read aloud, flipping through Calvin's reports and environmental assessments. "Bottom outlet inspection and cleaning authorized under State Water Management Code Section 427.6. To her it was routine. Just another filing among hundreds. But I knew this one would trigger ripples far beyond the county database. Calvin's documentation was flawless. He'd included water quality monitoring plans, wildlife displacement protocols, even contingency procedures for emergency refills in case of weather shifts. The environmental safeguards alone filled 12 pages proving compliance with every state and federal regulation. Patricia nodded with approval as she checked off items, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Calvin had built bulletproof paperwork for a job that looked routine but would deliver devastating results. By 10:15 a.m., the notice was officially filed and entered into the county system. Patricia handed me a stamped copy and explained it would be posted online and automatically sent to all relevant environmental agencies. "You're all set for July 14th, she said, sliding the document onto a thick pile of other filings. "Just remember to follow your monitoring protocols and submit the completion report within 30 days. I thanked her and walked out, wondering if she had any idea what this particular filing was really about to set in motion. Driving back, I replayed it in my mind. Legally, everything was airtight. Calvin's assessment had identified real maintenance needs, and the operation met every industry standard with full oversight. But the optics would be unavoidable. Martha's showcase of luxury waterfront living would turn into a tour of mud and stranded yachts, immortalized by professional photographers who would have predictably Susan escalated. She threatened to file an emergency injunction, claiming my timing was an intentional effort to sabotage legitimate business. But when I pressed her to explain what legal grounds she had for blocking authorized maintenance, her confidence cracked. She clearly hadn't studied the regulatory framework as thoroughly as she assumed. She was realizing that HOA power did not extend to state-controlled water management. The call ended with her saying she'd consult with environmental law specialists and get back to me. It sounded less like a threat and more like retreat. What Susan hadn't grasped was that Calvin had made the documentation bulletproof. Every protocol, every safeguard, every compliance measure was in place. More importantly, the dam really did require the work. The bottom outlet system hadn't been serviced in over 2 years, and several components already showed signs of wear. Delaying it would be riskier, legally and operationally, than doing it on schedule, any attorney who attempted. To dispute the operation would essentially be arguing that HOA, convenience should trump infrastructure safety. The turning point arrived when Calvin called with troubling intel he'd gathered through his professional contacts. Martha had reached out to 3 separate engineering firms, asking about purchase procedures and regulatory requirements. She was actively pursuing ownership of the dam herself, likely planning to close the deal right after her investor, Showcase, generated enough revenue to fund it. If Martha succeeded in taking control of both the marina project and the dam operations, she would hold total authority over lake access and water management. The idea of her wielding that power made my action feel less like vengeance and more like a necessary act of self-defense. Late that night, I drove to the dam and used my new access codes to examine the valve systems Calvin had described. The bottom outlets were enormous steel mechanisms that regulated flow with mechanical precision, capable of emptying the entire lake in under 24 hours when run at full capacity. Environmental monitoring gear tracked water quality, flow rates, and wildlife impacts in real time and sent automatic alerts if any readings drifted outside acceptable limits. Everything was set up for legitimate maintenance work. but the visual effect would be impossible to miss. Standing in that control room, I felt like I held the keys to Martha's kingdom. The paperwork had been filed, but a heavy weight pressed down on me. This was no longer just business. It was personal, and I wasn't sure I could step back. 5:30 a.m. on July 14th. Calvin and I stood by the dam as the first light broke the horizon. I could feel the enormity of what we were about to do. The ramifications of opening those valves would resonate far beyond this morning. The environmental monitoring systems indicated ideal conditions for maintenance. With favorable weather forecasts and no wildlife issues that would delay us, Calvin had walked me through every step. There was no turning back. This was the moment that would decide both Martha's fate and mine. But as I watched him prepare the valve sequence, I couldn't rid myself of the sense that I was about to cross a line I could never retrace. Was I really going through with this? Calvin's radio buzzed with updates from county officials as we began the technical phase of the maintenance. Environmental monitors registered wildlife movement. Water quality sensors confirmed compliance with discharge rules, and cameras recorded every procedure for the required documentation. We stuck to the approved timeline exactly, with Calvin checking in with oversight agencies over the radio every 30 minutes to report progress. From a regulatory perspective, everything was textbook. The bottom outlet valves opened smoothly and water started flowing downstream at the prescribed rate for inspection and cleaning. But it would be dishonest to say the timing was accidental. Martha's investor showcase was set for July 14th, with guided tours of waterfront properties that relied on immaculate lake conditions and clear water views. Several $7 million sales hinged on a flawless presentation, especially the photography sessions scheduled for 10 a.m., when the light would be perfect for marketing. Calvin confirmed that filing a maintenance notice 72 hours before July 14th would be automatically approved by county authorities, giving us a legal window that lined up exactly with Martha's biggest day of the year. Everything depended on perfect execution and split-second timing to render her showcase unsalvageable. By 8 a.m., the lake had fallen 2 feet. When the first boats began to settle onto the exposed lake bed, the damage was obvious. Expensive yacht moorings designed for specific depths suddenly looked awkward as vessels rested lower against their docks. The spotless waterfront views Martha had promised investors began to reveal muddy banks and disclosed lake bottom that would photograph horribly for marketing. Calvin updated me on the technical status while I kept checking my watch, trying to estimate how much more pronounced the visual damage would be before Martha's 10 a.m. photo sessions. By 9 a.m., the water had dropped a full 4 feet. What had been a luminous, pristine lake had become a barren scene, exposing the muddy underside of Martha's vision. Yachts sat stranded, their proud lines now collapsed against the exposed bed. Private docks positioned for easy water access now stretched out over dead mudflats. The $7 million views Martha had been selling resembled a construction zone rather than a luxury resort. I watched homeowners step outside to stare at the ruin of their investments and wondered how many were already dialing Martha for answers. At 9:40 a.m., just 20 minutes before Martha's pivotal investor showcase began, I drove to the lakefront to see things up close. I found utter pandemonium. The lead investor, a woman in an expensive business suit who clearly had not expected mudflats in place of sparkling water, stood on what had been a waterfront deck, loudly demanding explanations from Martha about why their $7 million Lakeview purchase looked like a drained swimming pool. Her smile never reached her eyes, and I could feel the simmering tension as she desperately made calls and tried to tell increasingly skeptical investors that this was a temporary maintenance issue that would be fixed right away. The investor exodus began almost instantly. A real estate agent made panicked calls while potential buyers photographed the muddy mess, likely planning to share the images as warnings about waterfront purchases. A prominent developer bluntly told Martha, "Call us when you figure out your water situation," then walked to his luxury car and left without a backward glance. 2 other investor groups followed within minutes, their pricey vehicles kicking up dust as they departed the community that was meant to exemplify waterfront living. I sat in my truck, feeling a cold satisfaction as I watched her world unravel. Still, an annoying doubt nagged me as I watched her carefully staged showcase collapse before her eyes. The media descended almost immediately. Local news crews arrived by 10:30. interviewing bewildered homeowners next to their stranded boats as they tried to explain how multi-million-dollar waterfront investments had become muddy wastelands overnight. One resident held up his phone with footage of his yacht listing sideways on the exposed bed. "I paid $3 million for waterfront living," he told the camera, his voice a mix of anger and disbelief. "And now I'm looking at what looks like a construction site," the reporter nodded while filming what would undoubtedly be a devastating story about failed luxury real estate promises. The fallout spread faster than I had expected. Agents scrambled to cancel showings, many calling clients to postpone tours until the water situation was sorted. Listing websites began changing descriptions from pristine waterfront to lake adjacent. Conditions. Sometimes the quiet person really does hold the most important cards. Looking over the havoc her overreach had caused, I thought about power and consequences. She'd demolished my father's bridge without warning or consultation, assuming I had no recourse. But she had underestimated someone who understood systems and logistics, someone who knew how to research pressure points and use legitimate authority to carry out strategic objectives. The weight of my actions settled on me. I knew there was no turning back. It wasn't just about the immediate victory. It was about having the patience and knowledge to outmaneuver people who think they can bulldoze through other people's lives with no consequences. Cameras were rolling, and I could hear the chaos swelling around us. By 7:00 p.m., the emergency HOA board meeting had begun, but the tension outside was electric. News crews swarmed the clubhouse, ready to record every instant of what felt like the public undoing of Martha's legacy. Inside, the mood was raw with anger and fear. The room felt charged like a community on the edge. Martha had clearly spent the afternoon trying to mount damage control. But the moment she walked into that room, I could see she had lost the political support that had enabled her previous power moves. The same people who had once nodded along with her marina plans were now demanding to know how their multi-million-dollar investments had become stranded mud pits on the most important sales day of the year. The shift from a supportive community to an angry crowd was astonishing to watch. Martha called the meeting to order, but her usual self-assured tone was gone, replaced by the frantic energy of someone trying to salvage a spiraling disaster. "We're here tonight to address the unprecedented infrastructure emergency that has affected our community," she began, her voice lacking the authority it once held. Homeowners interrupted immediately, demanding to know why she had not been aware of the dam maintenance schedule and why the HOA's legal team had not blocked what they saw as a coordinated assault on their property values. I sat in the back row as Martha realized Harold had shifted from community leader to scapegoat for a catastrophe she could not explain or fix. The financial panic was obvious in every conversation. 3 planned multi-million-dollar sales were canceled that afternoon, buyers citing concerns about water management reliability and long-term property value stability. Mortgage lender scald. Homeowners to reassess loan values in light of the new visual reality of their waterfront investments. 2 families were already talking about listing their homes immediately, hoping to sell before news of the drainage incident spread through regional markets. The community's meticulously maintained image as a premium destination crumbled alongside. Property values and everyone in that room knew Martha was to blame for the strategic misstep that had made this disaster possible. When Martha finally asked me to speak, the room fell silent in a way that felt almost theatrical. I stood up slowly, feeling every eye on me as I held the settlement terms in my hand. This had stopped being only about money or property. It marked the start of Martha's unraveling, and I was the one holding the key. The dam maintenance was conducted according to state regulations with proper environmental oversight, I said, my voice steady despite the tension in the room. However, I'm prepared to discuss a resolution that addresses the HOA's wrongful destruction of my father's bridge and the business disruption that resulted from your decision to eliminate my lake access without consultation or compensation. I could see people slowly realizing that Martha's decision to tear down the bridge had directly set off the disaster we were now facing. My settlement proposal left no room for compromise. It was thorough and final. First, a public video apology, clearly admitting that the HOA had wrongfully demolished the bridge and abused its authority. Second, $250,000 in compensation for the damage to my property and the disruption to my business. Third, full financing for a new memorial bridge built to honor my father's memory and craftsmanship. Fourth, official recognition of seasonal maintenance schedules that placed authority for lake water levels under my operational control based on actual infrastructure needs. And finally, mandatory disclosure in all future property listings, alerting buyers that seasonal water level changes would occur due to dam operations. In effect, my terms ensured that every future home sale in the neighborhood would be tied to my maintenance schedule. The weight of that hit the room hard. People understood what it meant. Every waterfront property listing would forever include language about fluctuating water levels, meaning home values were now linked directly to my operational calendar. Realtors would have no choice but to warn buyers that lake views might temporarily vanish during maintenance, inevitably affecting both prices and buyer confidence. Martha's dream of engineering a luxury-controlled community had collapsed in her hands. Instead of gaining control, she had locked the neighborhood into permanent dependence on the very infrastructure she had tried to bypass. Susan Mertz tried to push back, claiming $250,000 was too steep for what she called a simple access dispute. But by then, no one cared about the HOA's legal costs. Several board members quickly distanced themselves from Martha, stressing they had never approved the demolition and hadn't been told about possible retaliatory measures. The once united community was unraveling. Everyone now saw that their investments were hostage to a mess Martha had created without considering the consequences. Then came the turning point. I revealed that during the low-water maintenance period, I had finished constructing a private cargo ramp system. As the lakebed was exposed for inspection, I had quietly built independent water access. No HOA permission or marina facilities required. I watched Martha's face as the realization struck her. Her entire plan had been pointless. She'd thought she could choke my business into her marina project, but I had never needed her infrastructure. The demolition had been meaningless. The political fallout for Martha was immediate. Homeowners demanded to know how she could start a fight with someone who managed critical infrastructure without even investigating the risks. Board members openly called for her resignation, citing reckless leadership and failure of judgment. Investors pulled out, killing the marina project permanently. Martha's scheme to dominate the lake had imploded, leaving her personally tied to both the financial wreckage and the community's damaged reputation. The settlement signing felt less like negotiation and more like defeat. With cameras rolling and furious residents watching, Martha signed page after page with trembling hands. Her admission of wrongful destruction was captured for the apology video, and she accepted full financial liability for damages and for rebuilding the memorial bridge. She tried to salvage dignity, but I knew it was too late. She had underestimated me, and now she was learning that arrogance in a complex system is the quickest path to disaster. Outside the clubhouse, I looked out over the slowly refilling lake. This was no longer about payback. It was about a lesson in power, accountability, and respect for the systems that sustain a community. The new bridge would honor my father while standing as a permanent reminder that some things matter more than profit and ambition. And every time someone saw disclosure language in their property listing, they'd remember the day Martha Crowley learned that control means nothing when you don't own the infrastructure behind it. The quiet satisfaction was worth more than any public celebration. But I wasn't finished. A month later, I stood on the completed Carter Sr. Memorial Bridge, watching the sunset over water restored to normal levels on schedule. Paid for entirely by settlement funds, the bridge was both a work of art and a tribute to my father's craftsmanship. Calvin had overseen construction with local artisans, ensuring traditional joinery and carefully selected woodwork, blended with modern engineering built to endure. At the center stood a brass plaque, Robert Carter Memorial Bridge, built with precision, maintained with integrity, connecting past and future. It captured everything my father had believed in. At the dedication, the entire community gathered, many of them once loyal to Martha. But today wasn't just about a bridge. It was about resilience, about fighting for what was right. Mrs. Henderson, Martha's neighbor, clasped my hand and said, "I'm sorry we let this go so far, Daniel. Your father would be proud. We should have defended what mattered instead of chasing promises about property values." The irony stung. The very justification she used to destroy my bridge ended up destroying her investment. She left town quietly, her reputation in ruins. The broader market adjusted but stabilized. Homes were now sold as lake-adjacent with managed water levels rather than pristine waterfronts. Values settled about 20% below Martha's inflated projections, but buyers appreciated the honesty. The annual maintenance calendar I published gave everyone clarity. Realtors could explain, residents could plan, and buyer trust returned. Martha's legacy was unexpected, a community that valued truth over sales pitches. Ironically, her collapse created the sustainable, transparent community she had only pretended to want. At the dedication, Calvin showed me engineering records documenting both the bridge's construction and the dam's ongoing maintenance. He smiled and said, "Your father would have loved this. You built something that honors his memory while solving real problems. That's what real engineering is about." Standing on the bridge that both reconnected me to the lake and memorialized my father, I realized I had finally finished what he started. The conflict had strengthened the community, taught people their rights and limitations, and established an HOA culture of accountability. Property values were grounded in reality, not fantasy. And everyone had learned, sustainable communities are built on respect, not control. As the ceremony ended and neighbors drifted home, I lingered on the bridge watching sunlight scatter across the water, flowing naturally, maintained responsibly. The biggest lessons often come from someone else's failures, and Martha had given us a masterclass in misuse of power. The lake looked unchanged, but now people understood the systems behind it and the importance of those who cared for them. Martha had tried to dominate everything, but in the end, she proved the opposite. Cooperation and transparency are the only ways to manage complexity. The memorial bridge would outlast us all, a tribute both to my father's craft and to the fight for fairness. For the first time, I felt I had truly honored his memory, not just with wood and steel, but by securing a future for the community and those who stood with me. As the sun sank low, casting golden light across the water, I thought about the journey. The bridge was more than a structure. It was a symbol of resilience, of a battle fought not just for myself, but for everyone here. Martha thought she could control land, people, and water. But in the end, it became clear. Power isn't about control. It's about understanding. She taught us that lesson the hard way. If you've stayed with me this long, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Martha could have avoided her collapse? And if you believe transparency and fairness should always win, hit that like button